This is Congressman Waltz from Florida, a psychopathic Republican from Florida. And here is...
Feels kind of redundant.
It doesn't it? And here's his stance.
And from your perspective, if this deal goes through and we enter what's characterized as the first phase, does that effectively mean the war is over? Does a ceasefire mean that its work is done in Gaza for the foreseeable future?
Well, I certainly think Hamas would like to believe that, but we've been clear that Gaza has to be fully demilitarized. Hamas has to be destroyed to the point that it cannot reconstitute, and that Israel has every right to fully protect itself. So, all of those pieces, all of those objectives are still very much in place. Look, I mean, October 7th was a terrible day. They put everybody in a terrible...
All right, then he gets into the standard rant about how awful October 7th was.
But just so you all know, the yellow ribbon that the douche canoe on the left is wearing is a Bring the Hostages Home ribbon.
They don't mean Palestinian hostages, I assume. They mean...
No,
Israelis.
Oddly enough.
Okay.
Oddly enough.
I like that they're saying, some of these lunatics, a lot of them are saying forthright, like they're not hiding it. We will have a ceasefire, and no, we will keep bombing, destroying, ethnically cleansing Gaza. That's what needs to happen. They're not saying, oh, no, the ceasefire could mean the end of all quote unquote hostilities. They're saying, no, we'll keep doing it all.
Well, because you can always, it's like what the U.S. has done in the Middle East since the U.S. entered the Middle East, which is you can always create terrorists out of nothing. So as long as they have the Hamas boogeyman to point at, which is as long as there are Palestinians, even, infants, they will always have the ability to say Hamas and bomb that area or send in tanks. So as long as there are Palestinians, the U.S. and its colony of Israel will have the ammo that they need. If we tell Israel to stop, as evidenced by whatever went down with the ceasefire deal, I don't know, Trump, I don't really care. But if and when, and we've talked about this on the show before too. I think I did this when you were in Tibet, but like the times that the U.S. has told Israel to stop and then Israel does, because Israel can't actually persist as a settler colonial entity without the U.S. The only reason that Israel's economy is still holding on is because the U.S. backs Israel's bonds. They should be worth absolute dick right now. They should be worthless because Israel's economy is tanking. But the only reason, and I talked about this with Matthew Ho on my on Project Censored, if you want to go check that out, projectcensored.org, and he said, Eleanor, it's as if you and Lee wanted to buy a house and, Bill Gates was your co-signer. You could get any house you want. Now, this is basically what Israel has with their economy. They have the U.S. as their co-signer. So this is why they're still afloat. And that is a colonial relationship, right? Where the U.S. basically has control over Israel. Israel is only able to persist as an entity because of the U.S. backing. So it's that kind of relationship. And I think it's important to point that out because it makes it clear where that hierarchy of power is. Now, does the U.S. have a totally twisted relationship in terms of doing whatever AIPAC wants them to do and the far right of Israel? Absolutely. Absolutely. But the U.S. does it for its own interests. That's the difference. Because the U.S. never does anything because they just want to be benevolent or something. Just like with the creation of Israel, the U.S. didn't back it because, we think Jews need a homeland. No, they didn't care. If they cared, they would have allowed Jews in during the Holocaust in the Second World War, but they didn't. So it has nothing to do with loving Jews. The U.S. does not love Jews or anybody. There's no love in a colonialist state founded on genocide and slavery. So that doesn't enter into it. It's about their own interests. If Israel were to stop being useful for United States policy, you bet your ass they would walk away from Israel in a minute. So it's only because Israel is useful for U.S. hegemonic policy in that region that Israel is allowed to exist.
I want to read real quick the response by Afshin Ratanzi, a great journalist. I've had him on this show before. And anyway, he said this about if a ceasefire does happen. He says billions of people will not forget the mask being ripped off the U.S.-led rules-based order, quote unquote, with all the lectures on human rights and international law being cast aside to pursue a systematic annihilation of some of the poorest people on earth, the Palestinians of Gaza. The horror of seeing dead, injured, and starving children, and the devastating parents holding the corpses of their children on our smartphone screens for over 15 months won't be forgotten. Neither will the videos of Israeli soldiers gleefully boasting about their war crimes and committing them on camera. The real meaning of the U.S.-led rules-based order may be submit or be annihilated, but the Palestinian people never stopped resisting the occupation.
And there's a lot of talk that I've seen with, organizing, Palestinian youth movement and things like that I've been seeing that basically say, like, this is only the beginning. Like, we have so much work to do. Again, even if Israel were to stick point by point to the ceasefire deal, which is very doubtful. And I think that there's a lot of work to be done. I was just talking with somebody about, the organizing around U.S. labor for ceasefire. Now that there has been a quote unquote ceasefire, instead of walking away from this issue, okay, then how do we go to the next step? Like, okay, U.S. labor for a just transition away from war and the climate chaos that is literally eating up LA County with flames. Like, these fires are connected. The fires that are consuming my friends' homes in LA right now is very similar to the fire that is consuming Palestinian lives in Gaza. It is born from greed and colonialism's battering ram of capitalism. These are the same forces at work here. And the only way to get to a kind of liberated future, a kind of future where we have all of the things that we need, not just to survive, but to thrive, is to do away with these entities. And that requires building around these shared struggles, and also why labor is so important.